Welcome into the Phillies special. Today's podcast is brought to you by American Standard, raising the standard. Today, we're going to be talking about the Philadelphia Phillies and just where the season went wrong. Hi, I'm Kyle Walney, and I'll be co-hosting today with Joel Robinson and Alan Hirsch. So, we want to kind of break this down a little bit. We're going to talk about the different aspects of the game here, and we're going to see just exactly where the Phillies kind of lost their season here, because it seemed like for a while they were in a pretty tight race with the Braves and, even in the wild card chase. But really it ended up being a better season than they've had in the past, but still not exactly what Phillies fans were hoping for, especially with some of the big signings like Carlos Santana and Jake Arrieta in the offseason. So basically what we want to look at here is we want to look at kind of some trends throughout the season, kind of what's happened here, kind of where they started to kind of fall off the map a little bit.
Yeah, so before the season started, all the teams get like a predicted chance of making the playoffs based on who's on their team and who's in their division and everything. And it had the Phillies at just a small 10% chance to make the playoffs. But then the Phillies came out and surprised some people. At the All-Star break, they were 11 games over 500, and their chances to make the playoffs actually peaked at 70% on August 5th. They beat the Marlins that day 5-3, and they were first in their division. But then late in the season, from September 7th to 12th, their chances dropped substantially. By September 12th, they only had a 3% chance of making the playoffs due to a 5-game losing streak, and they just fell apart from there.
Yeah, it did kind of seem like the Phillies were kind of middling in a lot of statistical categories, offensively, defensively, pitching, all those kinds of things. It seems like they were kind of middling in a lot of them, and it seems like it kind of finally came back to bite them. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the big three aspects. We're going to look at batting, pitching, and fielding in that order, and we're going to see just exactly what failed them and what ended up really coming back and biting them and causing the season to, go awry like it did. So, like I said, what we're going to do is we're going to start off with batting. So the first thing that you look at immediately, you look at the on-base percentage for the team. Like I said, middling the team right in the middle, through 156 games right now, Philadelphia at a 315 on-base percentage as a team, which ranks them 17th in the league. Like I said, that's the definition of middling right there. They are right there in the middle of the league. A couple positions really giving them above average production. For example, second base, they are, second in the league right now in on-base percentage. That's, thanks to guys like Cesar Hernandez. Not bad at catcher. You got Jorge Alfaro and Wilson Ramos. Those are your two big guys right there that are responsible for your good stats at catcher. But then you got positions like shortstop, DH, right field, where they're really down towards the bottom of the league, and ultimately that's what's dragging down their team on base percentage.
Yeah, their team on-base percentage is just 315 as a team average, and that puts their OPS plus at just 89, which is far below the average of all the other teams in the league. And this could be due to a lot of young players. Like their average age for their batters was under 27, where you got other teams with some older veterans to just help out.
Yeah, and then again, this team's not hitting for power. I mean, that's what you really got to look at. Is this is a team right here where you've got a couple of guys that are a little bit up there with the power numbers, but as a team, a 395 as their slugging percentage is definitely not going to get it done. That's 23rd in the league. Really not hitting for a whole lot of power. They've got one guy who's hit over 30 home runs. He's got 33. Really not hitting for any triples. Team leader has 3 right now, and that's not going to do it. Doubles really kind of, the numbers are pretty low as well. So if you got a team that's really not hitting for any extra base power, then you're gonna struggle to get guys in scoring position, and you're gonna struggle to drive guys in. And I mean, really, that's kind of what came back and got them right there, is their ability to hit for extra bases and score some runs.
Yeah, especially with the way the game that is trending these days, with more and more guys hitting more home runs, the focus on launch angle, and not really caring as much as people used to about strikeouts. Teams with lower power numbers are going to get burnt, especially towards the end of the season, when teams like, for example, the Yankees or the Red Sox with like power players, or the Indians even too, with power guys like Jose Ramirez or Francisco Lindor. Those teams are really jumping out ahead, while teams without power like the Phillies it's starting to show.
Well, not even just power, but the Phillies were last in the NL in hits for their team. And they were second to last in the NL in doubles, so they just weren't hitting in general. Their offense just had a really weak performance this year.
Right. So, offensively, this is a team that, even, batting average, a team 236 batting average indicates that not only were they not hitting for power, they weren't hitting with consistency in general. So, really, in the next podcast, we'll start to get into what they need to do in the off season. But really, it looks like what really hurt them this year, big time, was definitely what they were doing at the plate. They just were not, hitting for enough power, hitting enough in general. Team's just not scoring enough runs, and you can't really outrun that no matter how good your pitching is. So with that being said, what we're going to do is we're going to get a little bit into the pitching, which actually for Philadelphia was probably the strongest aspect of their team this year, and I don't think that many will really argue.
Yeah, and that's what kept them in the race for so long for a playoff spot. But in the end, it just didn't pan out. So let's look at some of the pitching stats.
Well, to start it off, I'm looking here at the Phillies wins above average, and for those of you who don't know what wins above average is, it's basically wins above replacement, except that's relative to the average player in the league. So the Phillies, all of their pitching, they are first in the league with a 14.9 wins above average. Their starting pitching is first in the league with an 11.8, and the relief pitching is second in the league behind just the Boston Red Sox with 3.8 wins above average. So as far as the advanced stats go, they are they're killing it in the pitching category.
Oh, go ahead.
Go for it. Go ahead.
I was just gonna add in that the team's ERA plus, which rates their ERA based on, 100 would be league average, and so the team together had an ERA plus of 104, where most of their pitchers were well above 100, with like Aaron Nola at 170, Jake Arrieta 106, and a lot of their relief pitchers also had really high ERA pluses that put them way above league average.
Yeah. I'm looking right now at their relief pitchers, and there are some very good ERA pluses that I'm seeing here. Sir Anthony Dominguez with a 137, Victor Arano with 181, and then Edubre Ramos got just an astounding 214. So their relief pitching has been pretty shut down all season, even though they kind of have a lack of a closer at the moment, which could hurt the team, but the rest of their relievers have been very shut down.
Yeah, so, as a pitching staff, what they've really been doing well is they've been doing well at the strikeout. So, there's really nothing more efficient than the strikeout, really kind of eliminates the factor of, how good your defense is, and we'll get that into We'll get into that in a little bit, but, a little bit of foreshadowing, the defense isn't very good. So, when you got a pitching staff that can strike out a lot of hitters, what that does is it kind of hides the fact that your defense might not be too good. So, it kind of they were able to hide their defense a little bit for a while. Strikeouts per nine here as a pitching staff, 9.07. That is second in the National League behind only the Dodgers. So, really, if you're trying to minimize the effect of, a struggling defense, what you can really do is you can do that with the strikeout. Ultimately, it did end up catching up with them, and they weren't able to outrun that using the strikeout. But really, that's kind of what kept them. That's what kept them in it for a little bit.
Another thing is that they didn't really allow a whole lot of home runs. The team average of allowing just one home run per 9 innings, which that's pretty solid. So just opposing batters just not being able to hit for power against their pitching really helped them out too, I think. Along with a lot of strikeouts, which really decreases the amount of production an offense can produce against them.
Right. So, what just immediately becomes apparent is that, this team relied heavily on their pitching, and the pitching is ultimately the only thing that really, gave them a shot here. And, for the most part, it was their pitching staff's ability to pretty simply just miss bats, and that's what they did. They were able to miss bats, keep the ball out of play, but, when you couple that with, the inability to hit the ball, makes it very difficult on pretty much any pitching staff when they're not getting the run support that they need. They did a good job not walking guys. Their strikeout to walk, 5th in the National League at 2.61, not bad. Obviously, you'd like it to be a little bit better, but certainly it could have been much worse. So you can't really complain about that one too much. I don't think that really that's what ended up getting them. Walk numbers were relatively low. Not exactly where you'd want them again, kind of in the middle of the National League in terms of walking guys. So maybe that's, something that they could improve on a little bit. But, really I don't think that's what cost them. I think that for the most part the pitching was really never too far below average in any statistical category. It's pretty much, middle of the league and above, and most of them were towards the top of the league, not just the National League with but the entire league in general. So, you can't really point to the pitching too much in terms of what cost them this year. Signing Jake Arrieta in the offseason was huge for them. He didn't have probably as great of a year as his contract might suggest, but at the same time, he was pretty good for them. They got pretty good performances out of a lot of their relievers. So if you're trying to place blame here, Phillies fans, the place to go for that is definitely not the pitching staff. The pitching staff and the bullpen were just about what you could ask for.
You can't forget about Aaron Nola either. That guy, definite Cy Young candidate. He's just had a great year, 2.45 ERA. His ERA plus is 170. So, and even the rest of their good young pitchers, Phillies fans have got a lot to look forward to in these coming years as far as their starting pitching goes, with guys like Nick Pivetta and Vince Velasquez and Zach Eflin emerging onto the scene. Even though Pivetta, Velasquez, and Eflin, their stats weren't exactly very stellar this year, but they weren't awful either. So, and their strikeouts per 9 numbers were very good, with Pivetta and Velasquez both around the 10 strikeouts per 9 mark. So, Phillies fans have a lot to look forward to as far as starting pitching in the future.
Yeah, so, basically what you come out of that with is, pretty good pitching. Can't really complain too much about that. But kind of what I hinted at a little bit earlier is the fielding, Phillies fans. And I'm sure that you got, watching enough games. You got as many gray hairs as I did from watching this team try and field the baseball. Definitely their Achilles heel this year. In addition to the poor power numbers, the poor hitting numbers in general, you can't look past the terrible defensive numbers. If you really want to look at the basic defensive numbers on the surface, you can look at fielding percentage. They were second to last in the league, 29th at a 98%, which seems relatively high. The difference between Philadelphia, who was second to last, and Washington, who ended up finishing first, was only a tenth of a percentage, or 0.009. But really, if you think about that in terms of the total chances, which was well over 5,000 for all teams this year, the difference there with just a 0.009 is actually 60 errors. So, when you're committing, when Washington's committing 61 and you are doubling them in errors, and there's a lot of other teams towards the top two that are right around 60, it's going to cost you when you're doubling teams up in terms of errors. And that doesn't even, take into account range, just the overall range of the defense. Just from watching the team, you can tell they don't have a whole lot of rangy players on the infield, especially not covering a whole lot of ground. That's definitely something that hurt them too. So you have to look at fielding percentage, and really what that does is that tells you the story of the defense.
Yeah, I mean, we're all told at our young days playing baseball that to win games you got to throw and catch the ball, and the Phillies just didn't seem to do that very well this year. They had guys like, let's see here, Michael Franco had 15 errors, Jorge Alfaro had 11, Scott Kingery had 12, so that can't happen as far as games go, and you can't expect to win games if you can't field the ball.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Michael Franco, I mean, that's a guy who's, starting a whole lot of games for you on the infield, and that's a guy right there who, he's playing the hot corner, doesn't have a whole lot of range down there, and, he's going to let a lot through. He's not necessarily going to get to all those balls that, a better fielder down there at third base might be able to. A guy like, a Chris Bryant, a Manny Machado back when he was playing third base, a guy like Nolan Arenado, those guys right there. And while, they are the best defensive third baseman, or in the case of Manny Machado, you would say infielders in the league, those guys right there are guys that are really helping their teams with their defense in addition to their bats. Michael Franco, however, is a guy who's not helping you defensively, which means that he's really going to have to make up for it on offense. And ultimately, this was a guy who this year batted, 270, which was pretty good. Slugging 467, not bad OPS at 780. So pretty good. OPS plus 105. So, he's a little bit above average. In regards to that, he's a little bit above the league average. But if you're way below league average in fielding, then you're going to have to make up for that by being way above average with the bat. And he, his batting didn't necessarily outweigh his fielding this year. And, you hate to focus too much on one guy, but he's just kind of a case study. Really, you can look up and down the roster, and you're going to find a lot of different instances of things like this where you had guys who were, performing relatively well on one aspect of the game and, just couldn't be, enough above average or close to average to make themselves a productive player, make themselves a guy who was, not hurting you really in any aspect of the game and really helping you in the others.
Yeah, and you can have the best pitching staff in the MLB, but if your defense doesn't back that up, then it's not really going to help you win very many ball games. So the defense just really, along with the lack of run support, just really let down the good pitching staff.
Yeah, I mean, like we said earlier, it's you can strike out as many guys as you want to, and try and hide that poor defense and the lack of range that a lot of these guys have. You can hide that through the strikeout, but over a course of 162 games, water finds its level, and the things that you're not good at are really going to be, put on display. And if you don't improve on them or you don't try and minimize them, then they are really going to hurt you. If you look at the best teams in the league, they take the weakest aspect of their game and they really try and lessen the impact as much as they can. But for the Phillies this year, there were just too many weaknesses. They couldn't hide all of them.
Yeah, and at the trade deadline, they tried to help themselves out by acquiring some more offense through players like Justin Bourne, Jose Bautista, but they ended up just hurting the team even more, both with OPS plus below 100, both had negative wins above average. So they just almost made the batting situation for their offense worse for the Phillies, and they ultimately just fell short towards the end.
Yeah, for teams in contention like the Phillies were by the time the deadline came around, you want to see more done to bolster their team or to cover up weaknesses, and it seemed like they didn't really do that. They went out and traded for Wilson Ramos. They already had a pretty solid catcher in Jorge Alfaro. It's not like getting Wilson Ramos was that big of a step up at catcher, but at the same time, they did make that catcher trade while they had other positions that needed more attention. So, like right field, for example, they have Nick Williams, who's not had an awful year, but it's definitely one of the team's weaknesses, and they didn't really do much to try to cover that up, and they just tried to get. It almost kind of seems like they tried to get big names like Wilson Ramos to try to bolster their team.
Yeah, it was honestly just a really poor attempt at helping their offense that was just a complete failure, honestly.
Yeah, it seems like what they did towards the end of the year is they started to get a little bit desperate. What they did is they went out and got a couple of guys who, were some big names, really good in the past, and we're kind of hoping that, maybe going and getting them, a change of scenery, and they would kind of get, the guy that they used to be, guys like Asdrubal Cabrera and Jose Bautista. But they didn't get, 2014, 2015 Toronto Blue Jays Jose Bautista. They got 2018 Jose Bautista, guy who was signing minor league deals this year.
Not getting any younger.
Yeah, they were trying their best, making a couple of desperation moves. I guess you can't really blame them too much. But really what they should have done is they should have recognized that those guys that they went after weren't helping them too much. And in the case of Asdrubal Cabrera, there were other names out there at the time.
Jonathan Scope.
Yeah, Jonathan Scope was one of them. Guy like Jose Iglesias from the Tigers. I guess Manny Machado. I don't know if that was really in the cards or not. But there were other names out there, other guys that they could have gone after. They chose Asdrubal Cabrera. They chose guys like Joey Bats. And they were, clinging to that, that hope that they could, recuperate a little bit of what they used to be, try and catch a little bit of lightning in a bottle. Didn't work out for them. They probably should have realized it a little bit earlier, and not really continue with those experiments. Might have helped them a little bit, but really, defensively, offensively, underwhelming year. Pitching was good. Got to keep up that pitching, and it seems like they're going to have some things to address in the offseason, guys.
Yeah, I mean, all this being said, the Phillies have a good future ahead of them. They've got young guys, Scott Kingery, Nick Williams, J.P. Crawford, guys that are, and their pitching staff again, that are just, they're looking like they're going to be studs in the future. And next time we're going to be looking at what they can do this offseason. And if they put together a really good offseason and those guys develop like they're supposed to, then it's looking like the Phillies are going to be pretty good in the next few years.
Yeah, and I've got to give the Phillies some credit for the improvement they made since last year. Like, last year was awful all around, and this year to just have at least a chance to make the playoffs, even just like that hope, I thought that was very impressive to improve that much. It surprised a lot of people, so got to give Gabe Kapler and the Phillies some credit there.
Yeah, I know it looked really weird for me looking at the MLB standings in July and August and going, wait, really? Do we have the Braves and the Phillies right now in a race to win this division? That was something bizarre. That was something that I hadn't seen in a long time, those two names up there at the top. It's good to see the Phillies starting to put together a pretty competitive team, but like we said, and like we're going to address in the next podcast or the next episode of the Philly Special, bright future, but they're going to have to do a couple things, and we'll get into that in the next episode. All right, so thank you again for joining us on the Philly Special. Like I said, look out for the next podcast. Thanks for joining us.